Hello everybody, welcome to Russell Heritage Golf. Today we're going to be talking about a step-by-step guide. We did this for better ball striking. It got a good response from people that have been watching the channel. I'm essentially going to recreate a scenario of if you go down the driving range and you're struggling with over the top, what you should be doing by practicing for kind of 10-15 minutes, and hopefully it will be quite enlightening for those of you that, you know, otherwise are potentially slightly uncertain as to what's the best way to break a sort of habit. Golfers that swing over the top, I mean, you know, to some sort of degree, it would essentially mean that in the initiation of the downswing, everything's kind of moving this way. And generally golfers who swing over the top will end up also swinging slightly out to in, which means that you'll get a large amount of curvature, or at least some degree of curvature from left to right, which is unwanted. So what then happens is that your brain then starts to kind of try and figure out a compensation and tell yourself a sort of story, and you just struggle to get out of these bad habits. So what I would do is very similar to the better ball striking scenario, is that I've got a pitching wedge here. So we're going to go a little less lofted actually. I'm going to go to a 9, and going into the 9 iron, the problem is that if you went too lofted, you wouldn't see any sort of huge discrepancy. You know, if you use a club which is really lofted, generally, even if you're hitting it with poor technique, you're going to kind of get away with it. So we're going for a 9, so that there's an element of forgiveness, but also an element of technique change needed. Regardless as to what the fault is, which we'll come to in a moment, for your over-the-top movement, you know, what you've done is if you're going to swing off plane, you're basically going to have to compensate or compromise in the hit to some degree. So that basically means there's going to be a discrepancy between the direction the club head is moving through the ball and the relationship of the club face coming in towards it. So the first thing that I'd suggest is that even if you're a slightly strong holder of the golf club, is I just want you to kind of increase the amount of rotation on the lead hand a little bit. So basically just adopt a slightly stronger grip. So holding it in the fingers, and you can kind of see the emblem on the glove here, the way that if that was my normal grip, or if you use my watch face, I'm just going to kind of rotate it over a little bit more. Now, the reason for this is that basically when you grip the golf club stronger, it has an impact on the face, and it essentially means that you're basically, should we say, pre-rotating the club face. So the likelihood is that if you're somebody who's swinging over the top and you strengthen your grip a little bit, the likelihood is that you're going to hit a couple of shots, and now instead of any sort of curvature from left to right, the golf ball's just going to go potentially straight left. And that's kind of what we want, right? So we're not going to fix an over the top to a dead straight shot immediately. So what we're going to do is kind of just change this grip to the point where it feels uncomfortable, in the respect that it feels very different. I'm going to still keep aiming straight, but obviously what I'm trying to do is emulate the sort of club path of a golfer who would swing out to in. But we can kind of see the way that by using the 9 iron, decent sort of sound on the back of the golf ball, but just going straight towards the left-hand side. Now, once you've done a few of those, and you might do half a dozen, you might do a dozen really, doesn't necessarily matter. But what you can see with those 3 shots is that I haven't tried to hit them necessarily straight. I've just accepted that they're going to go left because I've changed the normal club face. So that would be applicable for every golfer, right? So we're kind of almost in those first few shots, we're just acceptant of the idea that the ball's going to go to the left-hand side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try and stop the ball going to the left-hand side. Now, the reason why it was going towards the left-hand side was due to the fact that the club head would have been swinging in the wrong direction coming into the ball. So instead of working on an arc and, should we say, trying to strike the kind of inner part of the golf ball, we were kind of hitting the outer part of the golf ball. So what we're now going to do is that we're going to just change the feeling, but we're going to try and keep it still orientated in the left hand. What we're going to do is we're trying to get the feeling now that the back of this glove is going to be pointing more towards the target in that post-impact position. So if you kind of swing a little bit out to in, the likelihood is that there's going to be a breakdown in this wrist angle. So what we're going to try and do now with my emblem, right, so you can see the Under Armour, I'm going to make sure that I keep it pointing towards the target. So all of a sudden we've changed the grip, which means the club face is going to be indifferent. And what we've also done now is, instead of allowing the club swing this way, we're now trying to encourage the emblem on the back of the glove to be pointing more towards the target. And even if, like, you know, on that previous shot that I just hit there, even if you emphasize it and really kind of exaggerate it, and what we're kind of doing now is that we've gone, right, we're going to change this hand a little bit stronger, And not only are we changing the hand so that it's rotated this more, we're also starting to get a feeling that we're trying to rotate that hand more towards the target. And essentially what happens in the golf swing is that the amount of rotation of the club face is very much governed by the relationship of the left wrist. So somebody who's over the top, you know, is going to compensate in the hit, and you're going to crumble, and your arm's going to bend, and you're going to chicken wing, and you might go down to the range with the best intentions. But I think stage one, strengthen the grip, so rotate your arm more over the club, allow it to go left, hit a dozen, or hit however many you need until you start to see a consistent shot towards the left. We know that's a problem in the club path, but the way that we're trying to rectify it is to think more about the back of the left wrist now, pointing towards the target that we're intending to swing on. And what that'll do is that should start to neutralize how much the ball was going to the left, start to straighten it off. But you're going to start to get a much stronger feeling for how the lead hand should be performing coming in towards the hit. So that would be good, you know. So what you've started to do is that rather than just keep embedding the same fault and problem in, what we've started to do is at least break a few habits by changing the grip and changing the feeling of how we're hitting the golf ball. The likelihood is that what would be causing you to swing over the top and the golf swing is going to be very much a rotation on the way back. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to do a couple of exercises for a moment where we're going to place our hands across the lower part of our stomach and we're going to go into posture. And what we're going to ensure that we do with this movement is that we're going to make sure that we keep the hands pointing down towards the ground. Now, if you're a bit, you know, self-conscious about doing this sort of thing, then maybe you do this at home and you just get a stronger feeling before you go down. But essentially, by keeping the pelvis pointing down towards the ground and really feeling like I'm turning my pelvis down towards the position of my right ankle, what this is doing is this is just making sure that from a side-on perspective, I'm very much staying in posture on this backswing position. But from a face-on perspective, it's also making sure that I'm rotating very centrally. So it stops any sort of sliding motion. And basically it means that if we're turning in towards that leg, we're staying very centered. It means that as we start to rotate coming towards the downswing, if I slide a little bit or I get too horizontal with my hip, then I'm likely to end up swinging what is known as over the top. So those would be kind of like your little feelings. So you're going to go stick with the grip for a little bit and stick with that same sort of feeling of a hit. But what you're now going to do is that you're going to do your best to get like a very emphasized feeling of keeping the pelvis pointing down towards the ground on the backswing. Right, even if you feel like your head moves a little bit towards the right hand side, it doesn't matter. And then what this would do from here is even as you start to rotate, at least you've got a much better chance of coming down on plane. You know, if you start to rotate and you're turning too horizontally, which means you're coming forward and out of posture, then you're going to come over the top. Or if you start to slide and try and rotate, you're going to swing over the top. So one of the reasons why you'll be swinging over the top in the golf swing is very much due to what's known as a lack of separation, which means your lower body can't move freely away from your upper body. But arguably the separation can occur very naturally if you're in a decent position at the top of the backswing. So what you might start to do is just, you know, you'd have to go for a full swing. You're going to strengthen that grip a little bit, and then you're going to think about the back of that wrist, and you're also just going to keep the hips pointing down to the ground and just really kind of exaggerate that for a few swings. Do some sort of short shots, and what you should feel is like the club is going to be working much more on an arc around the body, and there's going to be more space for the club to come back into. Now, fixing an over the top swing, somebody who's slicing the golf ball, they'd be very, very accepting of the idea of turning it into a draw, and that's kind of the feeling that I want you to have. Now, coming up, hopefully over the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks on the channel, I will be creating a step-by-step guide that you can practice at home. But you've got to remember that those of you that are thinking he's exaggerating these sort of movements a little bit, well, that's true, because a lot of people just want to get rid of that over the top movement. Now, as I'm doing this and as you start to practice this, feelings that you'll probably have are, you might feel like your head's moving. You'll definitely feel like you're staying a lot lower down towards the ground, and you should feel like you're swinging more rotational, and you might even feel like you're swinging a little bit flatter. But again, doesn't matter, because what will happen now is that if I progress up to more our kind of driver swing, which I'll kind of finish on, this is where we tend to struggle. amateur golfers that would be swinging this way, this is where the longer the club, the more the club head's further away from you and the less control you're going to have. And that's why this kind of club is absolutely crying out for you to be able to control your width on the way back and swing your arms more around your body so that you have a much better chance of getting the club coming in a better direction. So again, what you would start to do is the same sort of routine. Change the grip a little bit. Think about the back of the left wrist now emulating the club face. And then from this sort of position, you're just going to focus on keeping downward, and then rolling it through. And what that'll do is that will kind of help you direct the club path coming into a much better position and give you a much greater chance of a better contact. So that would be, your kind of stage up to now in terms of, how do I eliminate this sort of curvature? It's like, well, change your grip, think about the relationship with the club face, keep the pelvis very much downward facing as you swing back, and then that should help you feel like you're going to be swinging your arms much more around your body. Good. So similar to what I've done there, you don't have to always go down the range and hit the balls as you normally do. It is an environment for you to kind of have a bit of confidence and experiment with. So don't be afraid of doing some short swings, exaggerate things like swinging around the body, and you might just surprise yourself how quickly you can actually make a change the more you come out your comfort zone. So good, okay? The last thing that I'd want you to do, just to get a feeling for, because like I said, what's happened so far, we've changed the grip, that'll feel unusual. We're also kind of changing how the arm would be working, so getting rid of any kind of bending, we're kind of suggesting, right, the back of that wrist has to point down towards your target post-impact. So those are already a bit of a difference. But you'll get those quite quickly actually. You just hit half a dozen shots with that, you'll start to get a feeling for it. Then what we're saying is the biggest cause for over the toppers is an inability to stay in posture. So what we're saying is really let's just exaggerate it and really imagine that you're pointing the hips right down towards the ground or pointing your pelvis down towards your right ankle. What that'll do is, as you saw as I was exaggerating this, is that would then encourage you to swing kind of much more around your body. Now again, for somebody who's just desperately not trying to swing over the top, that's fine. So the last thing you'd want to be mixing up with when you practice is just doing a few swings right hand only. Now, we've got this new feeling, so we can get rid of the left hand so we don't have to consciously think of that. We can think a little bit about the hips staying down, but all we've got to do is in this backswing position, we've just got to feel like we're creating width still. So we've still just got to feel like my right hand is going to be kind of trying to stay much straighter on the way back. And the reason for this is that if you start to change this, great. If you start to improve this, but if this arm gets too bent on the way back, then what's going to happen is it's going to get stuck to the side of your body and it's going to force the club to come down too vertical. So we need this arm to maintain width, and then if you can just do a few swings right hand only, and all you're going to do is you're going to feel width like you've never felt it before. And the reason for that is because, well, you're inevitably going to be able to swing your arm, on a much wider angle than where your left hand can reach. But those are the kind of feelings that you need to have, And I think that it's amazing that I see with lessons is that we kind of switch things up and people have a little bit of a go with it. And it's amazing how susceptible they can then become to making a change by just breaking it down into patterns of movement. And that's what we're doing with these sessions. It's like, rather than go down the range thinking that you're going to make some sort of change, it's a difficult enough environment to make a change in the first place. Well then, if we start to put some of these routines together in a few drills, then all of a sudden, things will start to feel much better, and over a duration of time, and you might do this practice session a few times, you're doing your grip, you're thinking about the relationship of the hit, you're then thinking about staying in posture, and then finally instead of swinging around this way, you're going to think more about keeping your right arm straight. That's going to give you a decent shaped swing, and then from there you can start to, marry up that hit a little bit more. I'd strongly suggest that you start to do this, and I think the video that we did on better ball striking got received well from people enjoyed it, so I think it's something that we're going to evolve more into. Get rid of this over the top, it's something that we can come back to, but hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Catch up with you again soon.